nothing to see here.
Okay, let me actually read you what the sheriff has said. On Sunday, he spoke to the Daily Mail and said, nobody, this is a quote, nobody has been cleared as suspects. On Monday, he issued a press release saying the family, quote, has been cleared as possible suspects. Tuesday, he issued another press release. The Guthrie family has not been identified as suspects, which is very different from has been cleared. Okay. I also have not been identified as a suspect, but I'm in absolutely no legal jeopardy on that case because I live in Connecticut. That's not the same situation for those who are actually a couple doors down from the mother or 2 miles away in the case of the Savannah's sister and brother-in-law. And I'm not saying that those two did anything whatsoever to Nancy Guthrie. But what I'll tell you is that the sheriff all along has said no one's been ruled out. No one's been ruled out. No one's been ruled out. And while he's been saying that, he towed the sister-in-law's car and impounded it into evidence. He sent, and so did the FBI, law enforcement agents to the sister and the brother-in-law's house over and over and over, including in the middle of the night where they kept the lights out and took pictures at 10:30 a.m. And then again, they went one other time overnight. Why did they do all that? They didn't do all that at Nancy Guthrie's neighbor's home. And where Annie Guthrie...
9:50 p.m. That's when the garage door closed. That's when the last person who saw Nancy Guthrie alive drove away into the Tucson night. And that, right there, is where this story begins, and where, for Nancy, everything ended. Because here's what you need to understand before we go any further. Nancy Guthrie was not a woman who disappeared. She was not confused. She was not wandering. She was not the kind of person you worried about. She was 84 years old, and she was sharp enough to live alone in the Catalina foothills, one of the most quietly affluent pockets outside Tucson, Arizona. Sharp enough to manage her own schedule, her own medications, her own routines. Sharp enough that her daughters didn't call to check on her out of worry. They called because they wanted to. Because she was present. Because she was there. Every single day, Nancy texted her daughters. Every Sunday morning, without fail, she sat down and watched her church service. Not in a pew, but through a screen, streaming it with a close friend who had become part of her weekly rhythm. Her medications were taken on schedule, same time, same doses, year after year. Her routines were so consistent, so reliable that the people who loved her could set their watches by her. That's who Nancy Guthrie was. Not a woman who vanished. A woman who was taken. January 31st, 2026. A Saturday, in cold and clear in Tucson the way desert nights get in late January. That dry chill that settles into the foothills after sundown. Nancy had spent the evening at dinner with her eldest daughter, Annie, and Annie's husband, a man named Tommaso Cion. A family dinner. Ordinary, warm. The kind of evening that doesn't feel like a last anything while it's happening. Nancy didn't drive. She'd taken an Uber to get there, independent enough to arrange her own ride, practical enough to know her limits. That detail matters. Hold on to it. After dinner, Tommaso drove her home. He pulled into the driveway of her house in the Catalina foothills. She got out. She went inside. The garage door closed. 9:50 p.m. That timestamp, simple, clean, pulled from surveillance footage, would become the most important number in this entire investigation. Because after 9:50 p.m. on January 31st, 2026, no one saw Nancy Guthrie again. Not a neighbor, not a friend, not a camera, not a soul. And the world went quiet around her house. And then, in the hours that followed, it started sending signals. Not from Nancy, from her devices. Before we go any further, drop where you're watching from in the comments right now. Doesn't matter if it's 2 in the afternoon or 2 in the morning. I want to know where in the world you are. Because by the time this episode is over, you're going to want to talk to someone about what you just heard. In this case, does that to people. Here's what nobody tells you about the night Nancy Guthrie disappeared. The first witnesses weren't human. They were machines. Her Google Nest camera, her pacemaker app, a motion sensor on her property. These devices, designed to protect her, to monitor her, to keep her connected to the people who loved her, became the only record of what happened inside that house after that garage door closed. And what they recorded was not reassuring. It was a countdown. At 9:50 p.m. she was home, safe, or so everyone believed. By 1:47 a.m. her Google Nest camera went offline. Not glitched, not buffered, offline. 25 minutes later at 2:12 a.m. a motion alert fired on her property. But when investigators later tried to pull the footage, there was nothing. No saved recording, no visual. Just a ghost of movement that the system registered and then swallowed whole. And then at 2:28 a.m., the detail that stops people cold every single time. Her pacemaker lost contact with her phone, the device keeping her heart beating, the device her doctors monitored remotely, the device that had been faithfully syncing night after night for years. Went silent, not low battery, not a software error. Silent. Nancy Guthrie's life was blinking out in slow, digital increments, and not a single person in the world knew it yet. His Sunday morning arrived the way Sunday mornings do in the foothills, quiet, unhurried, the desert light coming in low and golden. Somewhere across Tucson, Nancy's friend sat down to watch the church stream. She waited. Nancy didn't show. She called. No answer. She called again. Nothing. By 11 a.m., the silence had weight to it. By noon, the family was at the door. And what they found inside that house, the phone sitting on the counter, the purse untouched, the car still in the garage, and the keys on the hook, the medication lined up exactly where Nancy always kept it, told a story before anyone said a single word. Nancy Guthrie had not left. Nancy Guthrie had been removed. And near the entrance, the detail that turned a welfare check into a crime scene in a matter of minutes. There was blood. DNA testing would later confirm it belonged to Nancy. She hadn't walked out of that house. Something violent had happened. Something that left a trace. Something that no routine, no pacemaker, no Nest camera, no loving daughter could prevent. And the garage door that closed at 9:50 p.m., it was the last door Nancy Guthrie ever walked through on her own terms. Her phone was there, her purse was there, her car was there, her medication was there. The only thing missing was Nancy. And the blood near that entrance changed everything. In Chapter 2, we follow the machines because they saw what no human did. And what they recorded will make your skin crawl. She was already gone before anyone thought to look. That's the part that stays with you. That's the part that doesn't let go. While her daughters slept, while her neighbors slept, while all of Tucson slept. Something was happening inside that house in the Catalina foothills. And the only things paying attention were plugged into the wall. Let's go back to that night. 1:47 a.m. Her Google Nest camera, the one mounted to monitor her home, and the one her family trusted to keep a digital eye on her, went offline. Just like that. No storm, no power outage reported in the neighborhood, no explanation that anyone could point to. It simply went dark. 25 minutes later, at 2:12 a.m., a motion alert triggered on her property. Investigators would later try to pull that footage and find nothing. No recording, no image, just a timestamp hanging in the air like a question nobody could answer. And something moved near Nancy Guthrie's home at 2:12 in the morning. The system knew it. and then the system forgot it. But the detail that truly stops people, the one that cuts through every theory and lands somewhere deep and uncomfortable, came at 2:28 a.m. Her pacemaker lost contact with her phone. Think about that for a second. Her pacemaker, the device regulating her heartbeat, the device her doctors checked remotely, the device that had been syncing faithfully night after night, and without interruption, went silent at 2:28 in the morning. Not a glitch, not a dead battery. Silent. Her life was blinking out in slow digital increments. Camera offline, motion swallowed, heartbeat gone quiet. And not one person in the world knew it yet. I need you to light a candle in the comments for Nancy right now. Drop a because what this woman went through in those hours deserves to be acknowledged. And if you're watching this on a phone at midnight, I understand why this one hits different. By Sunday morning, the silence had become unbearable, even if nobody knew it yet. Nancy's friends settled in for their weekly church stream. She waited. She refreshed. She called. No answer. She called again. Nothing. By 11 a.m., the worry had teeth. By noon, the family was at the door, and what greeted them on the other side of that entrance rewrote everything they thought they knew about that Saturday night dinner. Her phone, still on the counter, her purse, untouched, her car, still in the garage, her keys, on the hook, her medication, the medication she had taken on the same schedule for years, sitting exactly where she always left it. Every single thing that should have left with her if she had left willingly was still there. Nancy Guthrie had not walked out of that house, and then, near the entrance, they found the blood. Not ambiguous. Not a small smear easily explained away. Blood near the entrance of her home that DNA testing would later confirm was hers. A welfare check became a crime scene in the span of a single breath. Within hours, law enforcement escalated. Missing person protocols gave way to something heavier, something with more urgency and more dread attached to it. The Pima County Sheriff's Department was now working what they believed to be an abduction. An 84-year-old woman, sharp, independent, and routine-driven, had been taken from her own home sometime in the dark hours between 9:50 p.m. and dawn. Taken while her camera was offline. Taken while her pacemaker went quiet. Taken while the world slept. And the last person confirmed to have seen her alive was the man who dropped her off. The scene inside that house told investigators everything and nothing. Because while the evidence screamed that something violent had happened, and the question of who was responsible was about to get a lot more complicated. In Chapter 3, the sheriff says one thing. A veteran journalist says something completely different. And the contradiction between them? That's what broke this case wide open. Here's something they don't teach you about high-profile investigations. The evidence doesn't always speak the loudest. Sometimes, the contradictions do. And in the case of Nancy Guthrie, the contradictions came fast. They came loud. And they came from the very people who were supposed to be giving the public straight answers. It started with the sheriff. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos held the microphone in those early days. He was the official voice of this investigation. The man the public looked to for clarity, for facts, for the kind of authoritative reassurance that says we have this under control. And on Sunday, just hours after Nancy was reported missing, he told the Daily Mail something that landed like a stone in still water. Nobody has been cleared as suspects. Nobody. That included family. That included the man who drove her home. That included everyone in Nancy Guthrie's orbit. Fine. Expected even. Investigations are careful. Investigators are measured. But then Monday came, and the sheriff's official press release said something different. The family had been cleared. Same investigation. Same sheriff. Same week. on two completely opposite statements. If you're just finding this channel, hit subscribe right now, because this is what we do at Retracted Files. We don't skim the surface. We go where the story actually lives. And right now, it lives in that contradiction. That gap between Sunday's statement and Monday's statement became the fulcrum of the internet's obsession. Because contradiction doesn't just raise questions, it creates a vacuum. And the internet fills vacuums with theories, suspicion, and the kind of relentless crowdsourced analysis that no sheriff's department is ever fully prepared for. But the contradiction from the sheriff's office was only the beginning. Because on February 3rd, just 48 hours into the active investigation, veteran journalist Ashley Banfield detonated the case. On her podcast Drop Dead Serious, Banfield cited and these are her words, highly regarded law enforcement source with direct knowledge of the investigation. And what that source told her didn't use careful language. It didn't hedge. It didn't say person of interest. It said prime suspect. The name attached to that description was Tommaso Cian, Annie's husband, the man who drove Nancy home, the last confirmed person to see her alive. Now, to be precise, as we always are on this channel, Banfield was reporting what her source told her.
Glove found. First of all, there's no glove found at that house, no glove found near that property. A glove a few days ago was found within about 2 miles of the house. Somebody found it and called us. We'd be silly to just disregard it. So we went out, gathered it. FBI came and said, hey, if you like, we can send that to our lab. A discussion was made, and it was about half of what I've already talked to you in time-wise. It was basically a discussion about where should this go? Well, all of the evidence from our crime scene, biological, went to our lab. In fact, the most recent search warrant we did up in Rio Rico, that all went to our lab. So it made sense that we have all of that evidence, all of the identifiers for those people that lived at the house, worked at the house, maybe it's a landscaper, a housekeeper, a pool boy. All of that was at our lab. It made no sense to send a single glove to the FBI lab, have them find something on it, and then send it back to us.
The car was real. The impound was real. But here is where the story cracks open even further. Even after the sheriff declared the family cleared, even after he publicly pushed back on media speculation, Tommaso's car was still sitting in the forensic evidence lot. Crime journalist Brianna Whitney confirmed on February 26th that the SUV remained in active forensic analysis. The family was cleared. The car was not returned. Those two facts cannot comfortably exist in the same sentence, and yet there they were, side by side, daring the public to make sense of them. And then came the search. On February 7th, day 7 of the investigation, detectives conducted a 9-man, 3-hour search of Annie and Tommaso's home. The sheriff called it routine. The family called it cooperation. Neighbors and cameras captured deputies carrying evidence bags, toolboxes, and a white forensic collection case out of the residence. If the family had been cleared, what were they collecting? That question didn't stay quiet for long, and because a second major voice was about to enter the conversation. Megyn Kelly, one of the most recognizable names in American media, publicly questioned why investigators kept returning to the same house. Her words cut through the noise with the kind of precision that only comes from someone who has covered enough of these cases to know what the optics mean. It is inappropriate, she said, not to scrutinize the last person to see her alive. That phrase became a rallying cry. Two high-profile journalists, independent of each other, both pointing in the same direction, and a sheriff who kept saying cleared, without ever explaining what cleared actually meant. Two voices, two accusations, one sheriff pushing back without ever saying the word innocent, and a car still locked in an evidence lot. But just when every arrow seemed to point toward the family, the forensic lab pointed somewhere else entirely. Every true crime case has a moment, yet a moment where the narrative you've been building, the one that feels logical, the one that feels inevitable, gets picked up and turned completely on its head. In the case of Nancy Guthrie, that moment came from a lab. While the internet was constructing theories, while journalists were citing sources, while a sheriff was carefully choosing every single word he released to the public, forensic scientists were doing what they always do. Quietly, methodically, without opinion or agenda, and what they found didn't fit the story anyone was telling. The FBI confirmed it. DNA recovered from gloves found near the scene belonged to an unknown male. Not Tommaso Cian, not anyone in the Guthrie family, not anyone whose profile existed anywhere in CODIS. The FBI's national DNA database containing profiles from millions of convicted offenders and arrestees across the United States. Whoever left that DNA had never been in the system. A ghost, a phantom, and a person the investigation could feel but not name. And just like that, the narrative fractured, because if a stranger's DNA is at the scene, a stranger careful enough or lucky enough to have never left a trace in any law enforcement database, then this case is not what it looked like from the outside. It is something older, something colder, something that was planned long before that garage door closed at 9:50 p.m. This is the moment I need you to weigh in. A comment right now, family or stranger. Based on everything you've heard so far, where do you stand? I want to see the split in real time. Drop it below. But the forensic twist didn't close the door on other possibilities. It opened a new one. Into the frame stepped a name the public hadn't heard yet. Dominic Evans. A musician, a bandmate of Tommaso Cian. A man whose height and build, according to public reporting, matched the figure captured on surveillance footage connected to the investigation. Evans had a prior burglary charge on his record. Rumors circulated online. The kind of crowdsourced detective work that true crime communities do with relentless energy. About a tattoo on the suspect's wrist in the surveillance footage that some believed matched a tattoo on Evans. Evans denied any involvement. The sheriff defended him publicly. And this is the part that matters. The sheriff never used the word cleared in connection with Dominic Evans. Not once. After watching the sheriff deploy that word so deliberately in reference to the family, its absence here was not subtle. The public noticed, the internet noticed, and the question shifted from who in the family to who in the circle, because if not Tommaso, then someone close to him? Pause right here. If you haven't liked this video yet, do it now. It costs you nothing, but it helps more people find Nancy's story. She deserves to be found. Hit that like button and let's keep going. And then came the detail that reframed everything. Not the DNA, not the surveillance footage, not the impounded car or the 9-man search or the dueling journalists. This one came from Google, specifically from Google Trends data tied to the Tucson area. Searches for Nancy Guthrie's home address had begun appearing as far back as June 2025, 7 months before she disappeared. You'd let that land for a second. Someone, somewhere in the Tucson area, was searching for the specific address of an 84-year-old woman 7 months before she was taken from that address in the middle of the night. That is not a crime of opportunity. That is not a spontaneous act of violence. That is planning. And that single data point does something critical to the entire architecture of this case. It pulls the lens back, and it forces a question that the domestic narrative had been quietly crowding out. What if this wasn't about the family at all? What if someone had been watching Nancy Guthrie, her routines, her address, her patterns, long before that Saturday night dinner ever happened? For someone close to the family, that level of advanced searching makes no sense. You already know where she lives. You've been to the house. You don't need Google. But for a stranger, for someone building a profile, mapping a target, waiting for the right moment. 7 months is exactly the kind of runway a predator needs. And then there was the power of attorney. 8 months before Nancy vanished, Tommaso had signed a durable power of attorney, a legal document granting his wife Annie control over his affairs in the event he was incapacitated. Legal experts who weighed in publicly were consistent. This is a routine document. Estate planning, nothing unusual, but in the context of an unresolved disappearance, with a car still in an evidence lot and a sheriff refusing to explain what cleared actually meant, the internet did not treat it as routine. In an unsolved mystery, every detail becomes a plot point. Every document becomes a clue. Every coincidence becomes a thread worth pulling. The Guthrie family had also announced a $1 million reward for information leading to Nancy's recovery. $1 million. That number spoke to desperation, and to love, to the kind of grief that doesn't wait for answers. It buys them. But the answers weren't coming, not yet. The DNA pointed outward. The questions pointed inward. The car stayed in the lot. The phantom stayed nameless. And somewhere out there, in a city that had gone to sleep thinking nothing bad could happen in the Catalina foothills, Nancy Guthrie was still missing. Unknown DNA, a second suspect, 7 months of address searches, $1 million reward, and still no Nancy. Yet in the final part, we lay it all out. The locked room, the authority gap, the forensic anomaly, and the question this case refuses to answer. There are cases that get solved, and then there are cases that get lived in. Cases where the evidence is real but incomplete, where the officials speak but don't explain, where the journalists push and the public pulls, and somewhere in the middle of all that noise, a woman is still missing. Still nameless in the forensic database, and still unreturned to the daughters who text her every day out of habit, even now, even knowing she won't text back. Nancy Guthrie is still missing. As of this episode, no arrest has been made, no body has been recovered, no suspect has been charged. The investigation remains active, and the Pima County Sheriff's Department has not publicly disclosed the full basis for why the family was cleared, what the forensic timeline confirms, or where the investigation is currently focused. What we are left with is a case that lives in contradiction. And contradiction in true crime is not a dead end. It is the story. Let's lay it out plainly. Because Nancy deserves clarity even when the case won't give it. The DNA found at the scene belongs to an unknown male, not family, not in any database. That points outward, toward a stranger, toward someone the investigation has not yet named. In the Google Trends data, 7 months of address searches before she vanished. Points outward too, toward premeditation, toward someone who was watching long before that Saturday night dinner. But the car stayed in the forensic lot long after the family was cleared. That pulls the lens back inward. Physical evidence held, questions unanswered. The 9-man search of the family home, evidence bags, forensic cases, 3 hours of processing, happened after the clearance, and that pulls inward again. The sheriff said cleared. 2 veteran journalists with sourced reporting said prime suspect. That gap, that authority gap between official statement and investigative reporting, has never been publicly resolved. And the last confirmed person to see Nancy Guthrie alive has never been publicly eliminated through disclosed evidence. Cleared, yes. Explained, no. This is the locked room at the center of this case. A garage door closes at 9:50 p.m. Hours pass. A camera goes offline. A motion alert fires with no footage. A pacemaker goes silent. And by morning, blood near the entrance and nothing else. No witness, no footage, no trail. Just a locked room and a missing woman. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city, your state, your country, whatever you're comfortable with. And tell me, what's the weather like where you are right now? I always ask because this community is global and Nancy's story has reached every corner of it. Each you being here matters. Here is what I want you to hold on to. Nancy Guthrie was not a statistic. She was not a headline. She was an 84-year-old woman who texted her daughters every single day, who never missed her Sunday church stream, who took her medication on schedule, kept her keys on the hook, and lived with the kind of quiet dignity that most of us hope to carry into our later years. She was sharp. She was loved. She was present. And she deserves more than an unresolved case file. And the Guthrie family has offered $1 million for information leading to her recovery. $1 million. Not for a conviction, not for a theory, for her. For Nancy. That number is not a legal strategy. That is a family screaming into the void, offering everything they have because the alternative is silence. If you know anything at all, about the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie, the Pima County Sheriff's Department is actively seeking information. That number matters, and that reward is real. And this case is not cold. It is very much alive. The evidence points outward. The questions point inward. The forensics answer some things and raise others. The officials speak carefully and the journalists speak loudly, and somewhere between those two voices. The truth is waiting. It hasn't been found yet, but cases like this one don't stay quiet forever. Evidence surfaces. Witnesses come forward. Digital trails that seem to go cold suddenly light back up. And the phantom in the DNA database is a real person, breathing, living, existing somewhere. And DNA doesn't lie and databases grow, and one day that profile is going to match. One day, someone is going to know something they didn't know before. And when that day comes, retracted files will be here. If this episode moved you, share it. Not for the algorithm, not for the numbers. Share it for Nancy. The more people who know her name, the harder it is for this case to go cold. And if you're new here, subscribe, because this is what we do. We don't let cases go quiet. We don't move on until there are answers. Nancy Guthrie deserves answers, and we are not done yet. The garage door closed at 9:50 p.m., and somewhere out there, the answer is still waiting.